Thank you. So good afternoon, I'm Julie Saint-Arnaud, and today I will present with my colleague Simon Greenberg. We are both unit head in the Canadian Centre for Education Statistics, and we are very happy to be here today to talk about the program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies, or PIAAC in short. At the end of the session, if you have any questions or feedback, please do not hesitate. I would also like to mention that the slides are also available in French. Next slide, please. Now, a quick overview of what we will present today. We will first provide some key context information about PIAAC and the international literacy surveys. Then we will talk more specifically about Cycle 2 in terms of collection, content, and sample. To continue, we will focus more on the direct assessments and discuss aspects related to analysis, including comparison with previous cycle. For the last parts, we will provide information on files, tools, and products related to the Cycle 2 release. And our colleague from ESDC will continue and talk about PIAAC from different angles, focusing more on research. Next slide, please. The program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies is a large-scale evaluation of adult skills. It's an initiative of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. PIAAC measures the proficiency of adults aged 16 to 65 in key information processing skills in a consistent way across the participating countries. So it allows comparison not only within the countries, but between them. These skills, namely literacy, numeracy, and problem solving, are viewed as essential to function well in the workplace and in society. They are necessary to acquire more complex skills. PIAAC shows how these skills are related to social and economic outcomes and allows for a better understanding of how skills are acquired, maintained, and lost over the life cycle, including the role of education, training, and work. Canada participated in Cycle 1 in 2012. For Cycle 2, 31 countries completed collection as part of Round 1 in 2022 and 2023. Next slide, please. Measurement of skills has been ongoing internationally for decades, and Canada has been at the forefront. The 4 columns of this slide provide an overview of the main surveys on skills, including the domain measures, the number of countries, the geography, and the sample. These are extremely rich data with a lot of analytical possibilities. So to begin, the first main skills survey was conducted back in 1994 with the International Adult Literacy Survey and was followed by the Adult Literacy and Life Skills Surveys, YALS, in 2003. The last 2 columns are the 2 cycles of PIAAC. In terms of domains, literacy scales are comparable across the 4 surveys and numeracy scales across the last 3. In Cycle 1 of PIAAC, a special component on reading was introduced to provide more information on the abilities of adults with low proficiency scores in literacy, and in Cycle 2, it was expanded by adding the numeracy components. Problem solving was added in YALS in 2003, but the concept has changed for both cycles of PIAAC. Therefore, it's not comparable. Cycle 2 added the assessment of social and emotional skills. These have been identified as key competencies required for success in the labor market, and more generally in life. Next slide, please. Collection for Cycle 2 was originally planned for 2021, but it was delayed to September 2022 due to the pandemic, and it ended in July 2023. The sample was in the 10 provinces. It was a 2-hour survey, and interviews were done in person with a tablet. It included two main components, the background questionnaire and the direct assessment done directly by the respondent. In Cycle 2, we also had what we call the doorstep interview. It was introduced to minimize literacy-related non-response for respondents who did not speak French or English. It was a quick alternative consisting in a short, self-administered questionnaire offered in 38 languages in Canada. Our sample of 11,700 cases collected is representative of the population aged 16 to 65 in the 10 provinces. It allows reliable estimates at the national and provincial levels. In Cycle 2, we did not collect oversamples, but we have enough data to allow analysis of immigrants and indigenous populations at the national level, but it's important to note that it's limited for the indigenous population. I should add that the Canadian sample is 2 times larger than most of the participating countries, partly because we have two official languages in Canada, and also because we needed to collect enough cases to be able to have provincial estimates. This increases our ability to examine the skills level and distribution of different socioeconomic groups. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of content, I already mentioned about the 3 domains assessed, so I will not read the whole definition, but in short, literacy is the ability to access, understand, evaluate, and reflect on written text. Numeracy includes the ability to access, use, reason critically with mathematical information. And adaptive problem solving refers to the ability to achieve a goal in a dynamic and a changing situation and requires to define the problem, search for information, and apply a solution in a variety of contexts. The background questionnaire collected a lot of information about the respondent, including demographic characteristics, education, qualification and training, employment status and income, use of skills and information and communication technologies at work and in everyday life. Also for Cycle 2, we expanded it to leisure time. Social outcomes such as health and life satisfaction, background information about parents and partner, for example. And I already mentioned previously about the socio-emotional skills. And I will add that they were assessed using self-rating of aspects related to 5 personality dimensions. For example, extraversion and emotional stability. Last thing I would like to mention is that each country was allowed to include 5 minutes of national content, and this content is only available on the national file. So Simone will continue from this point. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Just next slide, please. So why does PIAAC use a direct assessment? What is unique about the PIAAC survey is the direct assessment. This test portion of PIAAC is adaptive towards the respondent's abilities and is the best direct measure of competencies. Indirect indicators of human capital, such as variables within our background questionnaire or BQ, do not show actual skills proficiency and its variation amongst individuals. Also, self-assessments of skills proficiency are biased. The skills assessed in PIAAC are understood as involving a continuum of proficiency. Individuals are considered to be proficient to a greater or a lesser degree in the skill in question, as opposed to being either proficient or not proficient. The measurement scales describe graduations in the complexity of the information processing tasks in the domains of literacy, numeracy, and problem solving. In each domain, this complexity is seen as a function of a small number of factors, such as the type of cognitive operations required by the task, the presence of distracting information, and the nature of information and knowledge required to successfully complete a task. It is important to emphasize that the objective of PIAAC is to see how the adult population is distributed over the entire spectrum of proficiency in each of the domains assessed. All respondents, regardless of path, even doorstep respondents, will have computed scores for all domains. Each of the three skills are measured along this continuum from 0 to 500 that has been divided into different levels of proficiency from below level 1, which is the lowest, to level 5, which is the highest. Often people like to use levels because they are more tangible. We have descriptions of what people can do at each of these levels within our user guide. For Cycle 2, APS will also be on a continuum with only 4 levels. And results are either reported as a score or at this level. Next slide, please. What is unique about PIAAC is that we have 10 plausible values for each domain and each respondent. We need to take measurement uncertainty into account when computing estimates and replicate the analysis using each of the plausible values. Plausible values are random draws from the estimated ability distribution of adults with similar item response patterns and background characteristics. For PVs, think of a regression where the predictors are item responses and background data. Plausible values are optimal for obtaining group estimates. They should never be treated as an individual score and never use the average, as variance needs to be calculated. You must use sample replicate weights and repeat the analysis with each of the 10 plausible values. These are taken into account with the macro that I'll describe later. Our survey has a complex assessment design. It was built with the multiple matrix sample designs where no respondent takes all items and no items are given to all. The path taken is dependent on an individual's skills. In sampling, we select a few people from the entire population. To those selected, we then give them a selected set of items. This is known as multiple matrix sampling. We do this for cost reduction, to ensure representation of target population groups, to achieve desired precision levels for target groups, and to avoid redundancy. Producing scores is a multi-step process. First, the psychometric experts in our PIAAC consortium establish the proficiency scales using IRT calibration. Through item response theory, a response to an item depends on the interaction between the ability of the respondent and characteristics of the item. This allows us to summarize data across multiple items, even if or when different people take different items. This is done for all skill domains. Second, the relationship is estimated between responses to the BQ and the proficiency scales. Because PIAAC has a population-based model, the data must be viewed at the population level and not by respondent. Third, proficiency scores were imputed to reflect the metric of the scale and the relationship between this and the background responses, drawing plausible values. If you do not take into account the sample and the assessment design of PIAAC in your analysis, chances are you will end up with the wrong answer. Next slide, please. So when conducting analysis comparing Cycle 2 with Cycle 1, you must take a few things into consideration. The domain of problem solving is different in Cycle 2 and not comparable to Cycle 1. PIAAC Cycle 2 covers the Canadian provinces, as previously mentioned, so the territory should be excluded from the Cycle 1 data when comparing to Cycle 1, as they were not collected. When looking at trends, cases done through the doorstep interview should be excluded from the Cycle 2 data. Information on how to identify a doorstep respondent is included in our user guide. And finally, trend error, also known as linking error, should be added to the standard error with detailed information in our user guide. If a literacy or numeracy trend between Cycle 1 and 2 is evaluated for a particular population or subgroup, the magnitude of the change in performance between Cycle 1 and 2 and the associated standard error must be assessed using the trend error. The trend error used is the same across all population and subgroups evaluated and is always specific to the domain, where literacy is 3.27 and numeracy 2.95, the two domains that you can compare between cycles. Next slide, please. On December 10th, PIAAC Cycle 2 will be released. In Canada, we will have a Canadian master or share file. It'll be produced for all of our sharing partners, including CMEC, ESDC, and provinces and territories with agreements in place. The RDCs will have access to the file, we hope, by the end of January. New corridor tables were developed for Cycle 2. A major StatCan daily release will be out with some data highlights. Canadian data codebooks will be out, and a user guide and a questionnaire. The Canadian or national content is not included in the international file, only on the Canadian share file, which is our microdata with no suppression. The international report will be the 2024 edition of Skills Outlook. It'll be available on the OECD website. The international file will be available through the Data Explorer tool on the OECD website. The PUMPS report and the metadata at an international level will be available on the site as well. The PUMP files for all countries will be found there. And unlike Cycle 1, there's no Canadian PUMP. The PUMP is public, and suppression will be implemented for confidentiality, such as for our income and age continuous variables, where they won't be available, and occupation coded variable ISCO. OECD analysis plans will be discussed a bit later in this presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so the tools in a macro have been developed to work with the PIAAC data by the International Consortium and the OECD. R in a state of macro will be available for download on the OECD website. A user manual for these tools are also available on the site. Statistics Canada will not be responsible for the international tools. RTRA, or Real-Time Remote Access, does not have PIAAC in their collection, but the Data Explorer tool is like real-time access of all countries' data online to produce reports and outputs. It is a web-based table and graphics generator publicly available on the OECD website. It does not provide access to the raw data, but has built-in reporting rules to suppress results for low-frequency cells. You can produce tabular summaries of selected statistics by subgroups, countries, and cycles. Tests of statistical significance within groups and between countries or cycles. Innovative report quality graphics, and export tables and graphics to Excel, Word, or HTML format. Good. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you. That's the end of our side of the presentation in StatCan, and we welcome your questions before turning it over to Bruno and ESDC.
Okay. So if you have a question, sorry, I seem to be getting some feedback from somebody. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask it face to face. And if not, And we'll wait for Bruno's talk to inspire some questions. Oh, hang on, something popped up. Any observations from cycle 1? Lewis, I'm not sure what you're asking exactly. How many observations?
Well, yes. Actually, I'm just thinking what we learned from the cycle 1. That is because I don't know that we don't have enough information on the indigenous population on the cycle 2. Will that happen across internationally? That is on other countries, or it's only Canada based on our own decision? Is that based on what we have on the cycle 1? Just want to understand what will happen in global wide. Yeah.
Okay. Julie, do you mind popping back in? Victor, yes, you do need, it's not a new application, it's an amendment to your original application. Sorry, just while we're waiting. To add cycle 2 to your application. Salut Sylvie. Sylvie Grenier joins us. She's the chief of the Education Statistics Group. I think the question is about kind of decisions on sample size from cycle 1 to cycle 2. So, and I'm not sure, Lewis, if you're asking about some of the international data. Like, I'm not sure if the research project is like, you know, what can I do with sort of maybe some of the other like Australian indigenous populations, or
yes,
maybe you can answer all those things.
Yes,
Okay.
something like that. Not only Canada. That's what happened in
Okay. I'm not sure,
other
Julie, if
countries.
Sylvie's going to be able to comment on international data quality, but I'm sure, yeah.
But maybe the first thing we should say is that, you know, Canada has always been a big leader in adult competencies, and we're far away in terms of sample size than any other countries. So yes, in cycle 1 we had the indigenous oversampling and we had immigrant oversampling, plus a language minority oversampling. In cycle 2, it was a really difficult collection with the pandemic, so we don't have any oversampling, but other countries don't have oversampling. Maybe New Zealand has oversampling of indigenous, but most of the other country doesn't have big oversampling like Canada. I don't know if it answers your question.
Yes, that's perfectly. I just want to know that something about it, not only in Canada, just also in other countries. That's perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I see a hand raised. Go ahead, Bruno, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, no, that is me. So I guess it's more something that to add to what I've been just said by Sylvie. In PIAAC, it's true we don't oversample this time youth, recent immigrants, indigenous population, and official language minority population. But keep in mind that the survey, the sampling is done in a way that it will provide reliable estimates at the national and provincial level as well. So we have enough sample in each of the 10 Canadian provinces to provide, at least at the high level, reliable estimates of skills.
Okay. Well, I think, Bruno, you might as well just slide right into your talk, and we'll all turn off our cameras and audio.
Okay, thank you, Grant. Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. So I am Bruno Rainville. I'm a director of an economic research shop at Employment Social Development Canada. My team leads the participation of the federal government in PIAAC. Of course, this is done in collaboration with Statistics Canada, who, as Sylvie said, has been a world leader in the direct assessment of skills since the 90s, and with also the Council of Ministers of Education Canada, which is a secretariat that represents the Canadian provinces and territories. So you just got, I mean, an excellent presentation by my colleagues at Statistics Canada, so about the design and the content of PIAAC. I think on my end, what I would like to do over the next 15 minutes or so is to talk a little bit about the strategic importance of PIAAC for ESDC, and then talk about the type of research questions that we believe the survey can address and that are in line with our interests and priorities at ESDC. And before I start with the next slide, just want to mention that this is quite an expensive survey to administer. I mean, it's a project that takes 7 to 8 years. It requires a lot of effort, coordination between organizations across jurisdiction and participating countries. So definitely a big payoff for us as an organization is that the data is being used, and I would say especially by the academic community. So I would say ultimately the goal for me today is to encourage and promote the use of the PIAAC data. So next slide, please. So why do we invest in PIAAC? But essentially, it provides a survey that provides evidence about the distribution of basic skills of the working age population. And because of that, it provides like background information for many skills development programs or initiatives across Canada. So on the left side of the slide, you see some programs that are directly informed of the PIAAC data. I just want to mention one, so the Skills for Success program. So it's a job training initiative that identifies 9 skills needed to thrive in work, life, and learning. And among the 9 skills targeted by the program, you'll find reading, writing, numeracy, and problem solving. So these are all concepts, skills that are directly assessed in PIAAC. So this is a very good illustration, I believe, of a strong connection between the data and upskilling initiatives by government. It has been mentioned by Julie earlier, so these basic skills, or sometimes you will hear information processing skills, sometimes cognitive skills, sometimes foundational or basic skills, but it's just all literacy, numeracy, and problem solving. So they are described as the building blocks, so in the sense that they are deemed essential to acquire more complex skills and help you navigate through the ongoing changes and transition in the economy and society. So if we go back in time and compare ourselves with where we were 15 years ago when the work for the first PIAAC cycle started, I mean, there has been some very significant change. So new technologies have been introduced, as it is always the case, but the way we interact with the information and communication technologies have changed drastically. I mean, the transition to a net zero economy has accelerated. So these are trends, and among others, that have had multiple impacts at different levels. So they come with economic opportunities, but at the same time, they may have led to changes in skill needs and some labor market disruptions. So artificial intelligence is a good example of that. So in 2008, when we started the work on the first cycle of PIAAC, I mean, automation, AI, it was really not on our radar. Then mid-2010s, there were concerns that a significant proportion of workers would be replaced by machine. This has not really happened. Now it is about AI. AI adoption is still at its early stage. We are just starting to understand its impacts in the labor market. And actually, early evidence suggests that the generative AI, for instance, comes with a lot of skill complementarities. So it's not only an increase in the demand for skills and knowledge in data science, but also in problem solving, creativity, communication, things like that. Another example is the increased use of the internet over the last 15, 20 years. So with the huge amount of information people have now access to, as well as the digitalization of the economy. So with many government or bank services provided online. So for people with low foundational skills, people who may have difficulties to read, understand, interpret, use quantitative or text information. So these transformations definitely represent major challenges. So So I just wanted to give you a sense of why it is important and why we believe that an assessment of skills such as PIAAC is a very good investment. So next slide, please. So what are the broad research questions that we believe PIAAC can address? So, I mean, the first question for sure is what is the level and distribution of the basic skills among the working age population? So in the first PIAAC cycle, so Canada performed above the OECD average in all skill domains, but was not necessarily among the top performers. So what will it be this time? Which countries will do better or worse? Any lessons we can learn from other countries? Canada also tends to have a lower proportion of low-skilled individuals, which is fine when we compare ourselves with other participating countries. But an important question is that, okay, who are these people? What are their characteristics, then their context, and what can they really do in the labor market? There's also a lot of appetite for skills profiling for population with, I would say, the underrepresented population in the labor markets, workers in some occupation, industries, and so on. So we have a relatively large sample size in PIAAC in Canada compared to other countries, but at the same time, it's not as large as it was with the first PIAAC cycle. So we might be limited with what we will be able to do in terms of skills profiling. Another very important questions, especially for economists, I would say, what are the associations between skills, human capital in general, and labor market and social outcomes? I mean, the results from ALS in 2003 and the first PIAAC cycle really have been quite clear. So higher skills has been found to have positive effects on these outcomes, and this is an effect that is true and over and above education. So again, we wonder, will it still be the case and to what degree? A third very important broad question, and I guess this is the first question we will get asked by policymakers and by senior management at the ESDC, is that, okay, are we doing better? So acknowledging that it is a bit difficult to talk about trends when we have only 3 points in time over the last 20 years. Still, I think it's a very legitimate questions. Do we see any improvements? Have the relationship between skills and outcomes changed over time? Do we see, for instance, an upward shift in the distribution of skills of the adult population, or maybe a widening or a narrowing of that distribution? If change are observed over time, is it due to the composition of our population, or maybe just a change in the performance of adults? And then another questions that we ask ourselves is to which extent these tasks related to literacy, numeracy, problem solving, or these skills generally are used in the workplace. So PIAAC has a skills module, so it will tell us a bit about that. It does not ask about the complexity of these tasks in the workplace, but still, by looking at the frequency, it gives you a sense of how important these skills-related tasks are performed and matter in the labor market. Next slide, please. So I've talked about the broad research questions of interest for your ESDC. Let me talk a bit more about some specific topics of interest. Participation in adult learning, for instance. PIAAC is arguably the best source of information on participation in learning activities among the adult population, at least the best source of information that is nationally representative. So it has data on participation in formal, non-formal, informal learning. It asks about the barriers to learning. We know if the training is employer-sponsored or not. Is it partially funded by the employer or totally funded? So there's a lot of potential for analysis here. We would also note for the first time, we have a proxy of social and emotional skills in PIAAC. So that's the big 5, 15 or 30 items. So it has been mentioned by Statistics Canada earlier. So it measures the concept of openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and emotional stability. So we would like to know more about this and how it is associated with different outcomes and skills in general. We also have adaptive problem solving, which is new. It replaces the other measurement, which was PSTRE. So what is the value that new measurement? How does it correlate with literacy and numeracy? Is it there to stay? I mean, these are complex questions, and it will take time to look at this, and I'm sure that many studies will be required to for us to give a sense of how important is adaptive problem solving, but it's something we need to think about. And I would like to see a more thorough examination of social outcomes in PIAAC. So we have measure of social trust, for instance, or civic engagement. So that's related to social cohesion, which is an important area of interest for our department. A few words about data linkages. I mean, I just want to say that for now, no linkages have been decided yet, and it will come with funding for sure. But I mean, if there are any ways we can improve the value of the PIAAC data, especially through linkages, we would be we are eager to hear about this. I mean, if you have suggestions or ideas, and what type of research question that could be asked through extra linkages, I think that will be great. And if there are enough interest for a particular linkage, such as, I don't know, the LMLP, for instance, I mean, this is something we could think about in the context of the ESDC data activities. Next slide, please. Plan research at the OECD. Just want to say, so part of their dissemination strategy is a production of multiple thematic reports over the next 4 years. So you see the list here. So as a member of the PIAAC Board of Participating Countries, I mean, my team has the opportunity to see the draft of these reports, to comment on them. So I think what I want to say is that we have a pretty good work relationship with the research team at the OECD. So if you are looking to communicate with the OECD about doing research on PIAAC, do not hesitate to knock on our door, and we can put you in contact with their research team. Next slide, please. Okay, I wanted to conclude with a bit of information about education and skills online. So this is a skills assessment tool that is developed by the OECD. Canada provides funding for that tool, and this is done in the context of PIAAC. It's a complementary tool, definitely. It will be available online, free of charge for all users. So what is this about? So just giving you an example. I mean, it's a simplistic example, but I think it will help you understand what can we do with that tool. So I don't know, you're a business association, you represent businesses, let's say in the manufacturing sector. The businesses in your sector are interested in identifying maybe training needs and literacy for their workforce. So, I mean, as an association, you could ask the OECD for a number of access codes, and this would be for free. And then the codes can be given to employees, and they can be asked to go online, use education on skills online application, and do a literacy test, for instance. And then the results would be sent to the association or the businesses. I mean, there are different type of output that can be produced. This is something you can see on the OECD website, but just to let you know that, okay, based on that information, then maybe the association with the businesses can decide if training is needed or not. So that's just an example. It can be used so in different contexts, profiling learners, job seekers, employees. We also believe this is a tool that could be used in a research or evaluation context, and this is why I'm talking to you about this today. I mean, maybe through a well-designed study, it's a tool that can be used to assess the impact of a skills development intervention, for instance. So the tool is being developed primarily for the assessment of cognitive skills, but other modules will be part of the tool, so such as digital skills or even the skills use module as it is in PIAAC. It is expected to be available at the end of 2025. So stay tuned. And again, it will be free of charge. So there's a lot of potential with that tool. So next slide. Let's see. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. I mean, for more information about research with PIAAC or maybe about the type of work we do, I mean, do not, again, hesitate to contact me or Edouard Rimbaud, the PIAAC manager in my team. I also added here 2 hyperlinks. One is to the US website PIAAC Getaway. I mean, if you are not, if you do not know that website, I mean, it contains a huge number of research reports and different PIAAC publication. So it consolidates what has been done over the past 10 years or so. So if you want to get a sense of what has been done, what could be done, this may be a good place to look at. Also share with you the CIMEC the PIAAC webpage on the CIMEC website. You can find a number of publications that we have produced with the data from the first PIAAC cycle. So again, this may perhaps encourage you to use it and give you some ideas for research. Also, thank you. Open for questions.
Hello again. It's funny, my camera doesn't show up until I start talking. Okay, so same rules. Chat in the, or questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can answer you there. Bruno, you had me at link the PIAAC to the LMLP. I will tell you that.
It's that would be quite interesting. The challenge for sure will be sample size, but still, I mean, if we, I would even think about PIAAC and PISA. So that's something I would be interested to discuss in the future.
All right, we have a hand raised from Sarah Brumwell.
Hi, my name is Sarah Brumwell. I'm a senior researcher at the Higher Education Quality Council of Ontario. Anyways, I just wanted to say thank you for this presentation today. It's been very fascinating. Great to hear what some of the updates to the test have been. One question I have has to do with how people's previous experiences with post-secondary education will be reported out. So the reason I ask is because for HECO as a higher education organization, we're very interested in how different post-secondary credentials differentiate people's experiences when it comes to things like skills in the labor market. And I know with the previous iteration of PIAAC, it was not always possible to explore that data in terms of the types of credentials that we actually have in Canada and more at like the international categories. I was just wondering if you could speak a bit to whether we'd be able to get a look at some of those questions or if it's possible.
Sylvie, you want to you want to respond first? Oui.
Oh, j'ai changé.
Excusez. En fait, I'm a bit surprised that you say that you were not able to look at them in previous cycle. We have both. We always have the full Canadian question that map our education system. And we also have then these scales to be able to compare at the international level.
Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified. I meant in terms of like the public StatsCan releases. Obviously, in the microdata, it was still possible, but in terms of just how it's commonly at the highest level reported out, because I'll say like that's one of the things we're going to look for first when we look at that publication. And I'm just curious if it's going to be featured or if it's something that we can get later on doing our own analysis.
I'm not sure let me see.
So I think you're asking what StatCan, you're asking what StatCan will be releasing in terms of analysis. I was just gonna say that we will only have a daily release, so a short article on December 10th, and unfortunately no associated reports. So I think this is a valid and interesting opportunity for further research from others outside, such as yourself.
So yeah, kind of. I'm glad to hear that we would be able to get that through the through the data itself. I guess, are there going to be, like, I know in the past there have been like the big StatScan reports that are specifically for Canada's results on this. Do you know if that's going to be around this time, or is it up to the provinces, I guess?
No, like the Cycle 1 Skills in Canada release that was released.
Yeah.
No, nothing similar will be produced this time around. But Bruno, did you want to add?
Yeah, if I may react to this, yeah, no, we have decided as a group to not go with a national report this time. Different reasons to do that, but I think one of the big reasons why we had a national report with the first cycle was the fact that we were oversampling a lot of subpopulation of interest. So now there's a lot of information that I think will be available in the international report. This will be a great starting point. The UCD also will produce Canada fact sheet to some extent, so you can expect to see some information on education. What I would like to maybe add, we on the CMEC website, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I guess you are aware, but I'll still mention it. I mean, there was a report on skill of post-secondary graduates. So this was led by CMEC, but it's available on their website, and you see information using you see results according to different definition of education and educational attainment, for instance. So you might get a bit of an idea of what could be done with the new cycle. But yeah, other than that, this will need to be done through research and extra analysis.
All right, thank you.
Just one point we should have said. We are not doing any reports, but we're going to have tables available on statistic website as well on the December 10th, where you're going to have the scale by education. It's not going to be really we have only high school, the highest level of schooling, but yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I will I'm going to check the chat one more time, and I will thank everyone for attending. And if you, I guess I can promise, because I don't have to do it. I'll make sure that the slides go out to everyone who's here today. The slides that we have, and I thank you all for coming and for participating, and we'll see you next time.